Hey everyone, I want to go over your final exam with you, and before I do that, I also want to give a quick review of all that we've covered this summer. So when you think about the whole summer term, we started in 1865 with the realist period that went until about 1900. You might remember that these authors focused on ordinary people doing ordinary things, using ordinary language, and typically this literature had a didactic purpose. In other words, it had a lesson that readers could pretty easily tell by the end of the story. Um, we also covered within that time period regionalism, right, which is realism with a heightened attention to place. Psychological realism, focusing on internal thought processes and what motivates different characters. And naturalism, which is sort of the darker edge of realism. And then we moved into the modernist movement at the turn of the 20th century. So, in the modernist period, with all that was going on, writers were really experimenting with their subject matter. Remember, they would explore taboo kinds of subjects and subjects that normally wouldn't be considered worthy of being written about. Um, Also, they experimented with form. So, free verse came about in poetry. They shifted in timelines. They shifted with the plots, the way that stories were told. There were all kinds of experimentation going on in the modernist period, and all of that. Oh, we have the Harlem Renaissance as well in that period. And all of that experimentation that we see in the modernist period gets kicked up a notch in the contemporary era, which started in 1945 and goes all the way to the present. You might remember I called this period modernism on steroids. So all the stuff that we saw with modernist in terms of experimenting with subject matter and experimenting with form, we see all of that kicked up into higher gear in a lot of contemporary literature. Okay, now I want you to think about how much we read. At the beginning of the summer, I mentioned in a video that we were going to cover a lot of material in a short time. That's what a survey course does. So think about how much we read. We read short stories by 9 authors, 11 short stories total. We also read poems by 26 different poets, 38 poems total, counting this week's poetry. Make sure you read those too, because they're really, really good. We read 2 complete novels. We read 1 novella, Daisy Miller, a novella being a shorter novel. And we even read excerpts of a 3rd novel, right? We read very short excerpts of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So if I counted this correctly, we read texts by 39 American authors this summer. That's a lot to do in 8 weeks. So you should feel really good about how much you've read. So, with all of that reading under your belts, what sticks with you and what would you recommend to others? For your final exam, I want you to imagine that you have been asked to create a book club, maybe at your school or at your local library, for any kind of group of readers you might imagine. Your job is to create this book club from the texts that we read together this summer. Create a list of those texts that meet the requirements, and then write a letter to your book club members that explains why you've chosen these texts. So let's go into this in a little more detail. I want you to think about which texts drew your attention. Maybe they were easiest to read, but maybe they made you think in new ways. Maybe they challenged you. Maybe you were really drawn to the texts that were about marriage, or the texts that were about racial issues, or maybe you were drawn to the texts that describe nature. I want you to think about that. Think about why you were drawn to the texts that you liked best, and create a book club. So you're going to have 4 to 6 authors from our course. You can choose a theme if you want to earn an A or a B. I mentioned a couple possibilities. And then you're going to write that letter to your book club members, and your letter will show your knowledge and your thoughtfulness about each of the texts that you choose. All right? The way that I'm setting this up is that you'll be able to have a little bit of control over what grade that you want to shoot for. So if you just want to get by with a C, if you only have the time for a C, you'll be able to choose how many authors you need to get a C, and so on. Okay? No matter what, for a passing grade of A, B, or C, you need a minimum of 4 authors from our reading list. At least 1 author from each period. So you'll need at least 1 realist, at least 1 modernist, and at least one contemporary writer. Your fourth author can be from any period you choose. So maybe you really like the modernists and you want two modernist writers, okay? Um, if you want to see, that's where you'll stop. You'll have those 4 texts by 4 different authors. You don't necessarily need to have a theme, and you will write a shorter letter to your book club members. If you want to earn a B, you will have 5 texts by 4 authors. So maybe 2 different short stories by Kate Chopin, or maybe 2 different poems by Langston Hughes. You'll have a theme, a general theme. I mentioned things like race, gender, and you'll write a slightly longer letter. And then to earn an A, you're going to have 5 texts by 5 different authors. Again, at least one from each period. That's a minimum for no matter what grade you want. And you'll have a more specific theme with a longer letter, more thoughtfulness, more detail going into what you're writing to your book club. Okay, so for example, I've really noticed this summer the theme of ghosts and hauntings, right? You might remember in the reading guide I asked you a couple times to think about that. So if I want my book club to be about ghosts and hauntings, the texts I might choose from the realist period, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, that might be a little confusing because there aren't any ghosts in the excerpts I assigned, but there are in other excerpts. So I'm kind of cheating a little here because I know the whole text. Huck, when he lands on his island after escaping from his dad, thinks that the island is haunted by ghosts, but it's really Jim. He hasn't met Jim yet. Chickamauga by Ambrose Bierce. Again, not literal ghosts, but there's a ghostly quality of the soldiers to this boy. The Great Gatsby, there are references to ghosts, and same with the Underground Railroad, and of course Ghost Sickness by Kali Fajardo Anstine. So there are my 5 different texts by 5 different authors. I'm setting myself up for an A if I can write a good detailed letter to my book club about these texts and why I think they're going to enjoy reading them, what my readers are going to get out of reading them. Okay? So I'm going to cover the kinds of ghosts in the texts, how the ghosts shape the text's meaning, and why I think the text will be fun to read. Okay. Oh, before we exit out of this here, let's go look at the assignment itself. Okay, so I hope that you've had a chance to read this. In the first paragraph of this assignment, I'm explaining what I have just said. Okay, and again, to earn an A or B, you're going to choose a theme for your course. You'll choose 4 or 5 writers and their texts from our reading list, right? Meeting these requirements, at least one author from each of these major periods. If you have at least 4 authors, your 5th or 6th text may be something I didn't assign, as long as it's an American work of fiction, drama, or poetry that's written after 1865. Does that make sense? So for example, a lot of students really like Maya Angelou, and I didn't assign anything by her. So if you have at least 4 texts that I did assign, your 5th one could be a Maya Angelou poem if that fits your theme. Okay? You're going to write your letter, list your texts. It makes sense structurally to have a short intro and then to have a paragraph on each text and a short conclusion, right? So on each text, you should have a very brief recap for your potential book club readers, and then an explanation of why you chose the text, why you want your readers to read it, what's the value of the text, what would students get out of reading it, and then of course how it relates to your theme if you're going for a B or an A and you've picked a theme. Okay. Additional requirements, you need to meet the length requirements, you need to show basic control of your writing, and of course you need to be free of plagiarism and cheating. Do not look at other websites. Do not look at websites at all for this. You may use your books, your copies of the texts, of course. This is an open book exam and you will need to use quotations, but I don't want you to go to CliffsNotes or those other kinds of sites out there. It's pretty easy for me to tell when students have done that, so please avoid doing that. Okay, the rubric is here. So again, you can see there are different columns for the grades that you want to earn. I've already mentioned the different numbers of authors for a C. You'll need to write at least 750 words to earn a C, and slightly longer letters if you want to get higher grades. Okay, original ideas, good clear summary that shows your understanding of the material, and so on. Also remember the basic English 101 stuff. Make sure your paragraphs are focused. Make sure you are writing clear sentences. Don't forget to proofread. And then the other stuff we've talked about this semester about quoting and citing. There are some reminders at the bottom of this handout about that. I also want to make it clear that you should have original material here. Don't simply summarize what you've already written. I don't want you to cut and paste from a response paper or from your expanded essay. I want this writing to be new material for this exam. You can echo things that interested you before, right? So if you already wrote a paper on the marriage theme in A New England Nun, you can still cover that, but I don't want you to simply cut and paste what you already did. Okay? If you have any questions about these requirements, make sure to contact me. I want to talk about the deadline real briefly. The deadline for this exam in the syllabus is Thursday night, August 4th, 11:59 p.m. That is when our course ends. This course goes through August 4th, and ideally you will be able to complete the course at that point. However, I am able to give you a little grace period here if you want extra time and if you want to work on this course after it officially ends on August 4th. So you have the option to take an extension until August 6th. If you want that, and that would be 8 a.m. because I need to start grading Saturday morning. I need to finish my grading Saturday, okay? So if you want that extension, make sure you email me before August 4th so that we can both plan accordingly, okay? After 8 a.m., after 8:15 a.m. on Saturday, late exams will get a grade penalty, and then I will not accept work after the 6th at 3 o'clock. Anything that comes in after that will not be considered for a grade unless there's been some emergency. If there's an emergency that comes up, please don't just disappear. Please stay in contact with me. You might qualify for a grade of incomplete. Okay? The other details are here. I don't want to go over a lot of these. You can read all of them and let me know if you have any questions. I do just want to remind you to give yourself plenty of time to do this. Don't try to do it all in one sitting at the last minute. I would encourage you to maybe start planning and listing and brainstorming ideas really soon. And then maybe tomorrow, write a draft. I'm assuming that you're watching this tonight on Tuesday. So maybe on Wednesday, write a draft. And on Thursday, proofread it, put on your final touches, and submit it Thursday night. Or Friday or Saturday morning if you have emailed me to arrange an extension. If you have been doing the reading for this class, if you've been participating in the discussions, you are definitely prepared for this exam, okay? You might need to go back and review a few things that we read in June. They might not be clear in your memory anymore, so you might need to go back and refresh your memory, spend some time with these characters that you liked. But generally speaking, if you've been doing well on the discussion posts and response papers, you know the kind of detail that I'm looking for. You know how I'm looking for textual evidence to support your interpretations of these texts. So I'm going to look for the same ideas again, not the same concepts, the same kinds of skills in this exam. Email me if you have questions. But remember, it is an exam, so do your own work and try to have fun with it. Okay? Try to be creative. I look forward to reading what you come up with. Have fun.